When my daughter got divorced, she came back home with my 9-year-old granddaughter. In the middle of the night, she burst into my room whispering, "Grandpa, run outside, now." When I asked why, she replied, "Look who's in the hallway." I froze at what I found. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I'm Lance, and at 62 years old, I thought I had seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in September when my daughter Thalia showed up at my doorstep with my 9-year-old granddaughter Emma, their suitcases scattered around them like the remnants of a life that had just fallen apart. "Dad, can we stay here for a while?" Thalia's voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes avoiding mine. Emma clung to her mother's leg, her small face pale and drawn in a way that made my chest tighten. Of course, I said yes. What father wouldn't? But as I helped them carry their belongings into the house I'd lived in, alone for the past 3 years since my wife Margaret passed, something felt wrong. The way Thalia kept glancing over her shoulder, the way Emma flinched when I reached out to hug her, these weren't the behaviors of someone simply going through a difficult divorce. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" I asked Thalia as we settled in the living room. Emma had immediately curled up in the corner of the couch, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit that I remembered buying her for her 6th birthday. "It's been hard, Dad, really hard." Thalia's hand shook as she smoothed down her brown hair. I noticed then what I hadn't seen at first, a faint yellowish bruise along her jawline, carefully concealed with makeup. "Marcus and I, we just couldn't make it work anymore." Marcus. Her husband of 12 years, the man who used to call me every Father's Day without fail, who helped me fix my roof 2 summers ago. The same man who, according to Thalia, had simply grown apart from her. But bruises don't come from growing apart. That first night I made them spaghetti and meatballs, Emma's favorite. As we sat around my small dining table, I tried to keep the conversation light, asking about school, about Emma's friends. But my granddaughter barely spoke, pushing food around her plate with the mechanical movements of someone much older than 9. "Emma, honey, do you want to tell Grandpa about your new teacher?" Thalia's voice had that forced brightness parents use when they were trying too hard. Emma looked up at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of Thalia at that age. "She's nice," she said quietly, then went back to her food. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed in what used to be Thalia's childhood room, my daughter and I sat in the living room. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the questions I wanted to ask but didn't know how to voice. "Dad," Thalia said suddenly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise me you won't ask questions." My stomach dropped. "Thalia, what's going on? Promise me first." I studied her face, seeing the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "Okay, I promise. If anyone comes looking for us, anyone at all, you tell them we're not here. You tell them you haven't seen us." "Sweetheart, you're scaring me. Who would be looking for you?" She shook her head. "You promised, Dad. No questions." That night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of my house with 2 extra people in it. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful footsteps like someone trying not to be heard. I assumed it was Emma getting up for the bathroom, but then I heard the front door open and close with the faintest click. I got up and looked out my bedroom window, but the street was empty, except for the usual parked cars. When I checked on Emma, she was fast asleep in her bed. Thalia's room was empty. She came back an hour later. I heard the door again, those same careful footsteps. In the morning, when I asked if she was having trouble sleeping, she just shrugged and said she'd gone out for some air. The pattern continued for the next 3 days. During the day, Thalia seemed nervous, jumping at every sound, checking the windows constantly. She insisted on keeping all the curtains drawn. When the mailman came to the door, she made Emma hide in the bathroom until he left. "Mom, why can't I play in the backyard?" Emma asked on Friday afternoon. Because it's better if you stay inside right now, baby." "But why?" "Because I said so." The sharpness in Thalia's voice made Emma's eyes fill with tears. My daughter immediately softened, pulling Emma into a hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy's just tired." But I saw something else in Thalia's eyes when she thought no one was looking. Terror. On Saturday evening, I decided to stay awake and see what these midnight walks were really about. I positioned myself in the chair by my bedroom window, the one with a clear view of the front yard and street. At exactly 1:47 in the morning, Thalia slipped out of the house. This time, I saw her walk to the end of the driveway and stop. A car pulled up, a dark sedan with tinted windows. Thalia approached the driver's side and they talked for maybe 5 minutes. I couldn't see who was in the car, but something about the interaction made my blood run cold. The way Thalia stood, her body language, she looked like prey talking to a predator. When she came back inside, I pretended to be asleep, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. The next morning, Emma seemed more withdrawn than usual. She barely touched her breakfast, and when I asked if she wanted to help me in the garden, she shook her head. "Emma," I said gently, kneeling down to her level, "is everything okay?" She glanced toward the kitchen where Thalia was washing dishes, then leaned closer to me. "Grandpa," she whispered, "are the bad men going to find us here?" My heart stopped. "What bad men, sweetheart?" "The ones Mommy is scared of." Before I could ask more, Thalia appeared in the doorway. "Emma, come help me fold the laundry." That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about Emma's words, about the mysterious car, about the bruise on Thalia's face that was only now starting to fade. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than a simple divorce, and my granddaughter knew more than she was letting on. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I heard Emma's door creak open. "Grandpa, wake up!" Emma's small hand shook my shoulder urgently. "You have to come outside, right now." I jolted awake, my heart hammering. The red numbers on my bedside clock showed 2:23 in the morning. Emma stood beside my bed in her pink pajamas, her face pale in the darkness, her eyes wide with fear. "Emma, what's wrong, sweetheart?" "Shh." She pressed her finger to her lips, glancing toward my bedroom door. "You have to be quiet. Come to the street with me. Hurry." Something in her voice, a mature urgency that no 9-year-old should possess, made me swing my legs out of bed without questioning her. I grabbed my robe and followed her small figure as she tiptoed toward the front door with the practiced stealth of someone who had done this before. "Emma, wait," I whispered as she reached for the door handle. "Tell me what's happening." She turned to look at me, and in the dim light from the street lamp filtering through the window, I saw something that made my stomach clench. This wasn't the face of a confused child. This was the face of someone who had seen too much. "Look who's in the hallway," she whispered back. My blood turned to ice. Someone was in my house. I moved past Emma, every muscle in my body tensing as I approached the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The house was dark except for the faint glow from a nightlight Emma had plugged in near the bathroom. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out 2 figures standing near Thalia's room. One was my daughter, the other was a man. They were speaking in hushed tones, but I could hear the intensity in their voices. The man was tall, wearing dark clothes, and something about his posture, aggressive, looming, made every protective instinct I had flare to life. "I told you I need more time," Thalia was saying. "Time's up, Thalia. He's getting impatient." The man's voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it in the darkness. He stepped closer to my daughter, and she backed against the wall. "Please, just a few more days." "I'm working on it." "You've been saying that for weeks. Do you want me to tell him you're not cooperating?" The threat in his voice was unmistakable. I started to step forward, ready to demand answers, when Emma tugged at my robe. "Don't let them see you," she whispered. "Not yet." Something in her tone made me hesitate. This child knew something I didn't, something that made her afraid for me to intervene. "I am cooperating," Thalia said, her voice breaking slightly. "I brought her here, didn't I? I'm keeping her safe like you wanted." "Her?" My mind raced. Were they talking about Emma? The man moved again, and this time a shaft of light from the street lamp hit his face. My breath caught in my throat. Marcus, my son-in-law, the man who was supposed to be my daughter's ex-husband. But this wasn't the Marcus I knew, the one who brought flowers for Thalia on their anniversary, who taught Emma to ride a bike in my driveway. This Marcus looked dangerous. His face was hard, his movements predatory. "The old man suspects something," Marcus said. "I saw him watching the other night. He doesn't know anything? I've been careful." "You better hope so, because if he gets in the way—" Marcus let the threat hang in the air. My hands clenched into fists. How dare he threaten me in my own home? But Emma's small hand gripped my arm tighter, holding me back. "He won't be a problem," Thalia said quickly. "Dad trusts me. He believes the divorce story." Divorce story, so it had all been a lie. Good, because boss is getting tired of waiting. He wants what he's owed, and if you can't deliver— Marcus stepped even closer to Thalia, backing her further against the wall. "Let's just say there are other ways to collect." "Don't threaten me, Marcus. I'm doing everything you asked." "Are you?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're stalling. Maybe you need a reminder of what happens when people don't pay their debts." Marcus raised his hand, and I saw Thalia flinch. The same flinch I'd seen from Emma when I'd tried to hug her that first day. The pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they formed made me sick. "I'll get the money," Thalia whispered. "I just need—" "No more excuses." Marcus grabbed her arm. "Boss wants $50,000 by Friday or the deal's off, and you know what that means for little Emma." $50,000. My granddaughter. The fear in Emma's eyes suddenly made perfect sense. "You're hurting me," Thalia said, trying to pull away from his grip. "This is nothing compared to what will happen if you don't deliver. Remember, Thalia, we know where you are now. We know where she is. There's nowhere you can run that we won't find you." That's when I couldn't hold back anymore. Seeing my daughter being threatened in my own house, hearing them talk about Emma like she was some kind of commodity, something snapped inside me. "Get your hands off my daughter." My voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Both Thalia and Marcus spun toward me, their faces caught in the pale light. Thalia's expression was pure terror. Marcus's was cold calculation. "Dad, no!" Thalia gasped. Marcus released her arm and turned to face me fully. In the better light, I could see that this man bore little resemblance to the son-in-law I thought I knew. His face was harder, meaner. His eyes held a coldness that made my skin crawl. "Well, well," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The old man finally shows himself. "Thalia, you didn't tell me your father was such a light sleeper." "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, stepping protectively in front of Emma, who had followed me into the hallway. "I thought you two were divorced," Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Divorced? Is that what she told you?" He looked at Thalia with mock disappointment. "Now, honey, that's not very nice, lying to your old dad like that." "Thalia," I said, my voice steady, despite the fear coursing through me. "What is he talking about?" My daughter's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked between Marcus and me. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to get involved in this." "You're involved in what?" Marcus stepped forward, and I instinctively moved Emma behind me. "Let me explain, since your daughter seems to have lost her tongue." His voice was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. "See, Thalia here owes some very important people a lot of money, and when people don't pay their debts," he shrugged, "well, let's just say collections can get creative." "I don't owe them anything," Thalia burst out. "You're the one who—" "Shut up," Marcus snapped, his mask of civility dropping instantly. "You married me, which makes your debts my debts, and my debts are now your problem." I looked at my daughter, seeing her properly for the first time since she'd arrived. The bruises, the fear, the way she jumped at every sound. It all made sense now. "How much?" I asked quietly. Marcus smiled again. "Now we're talking. $50,000 cash by Friday. And if I don't pay?" His smile widened, and he glanced meaningfully at Emma, who was pressed against my back. "Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that." The threat was clear. My granddaughter's safety hung in the balance, and we all knew it. But as I looked at Marcus, really looked at him, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This was just the beginning. After Marcus left that night, slipping out through my back door like the snake he was, I sat Thalia down at my kitchen table. Emma had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the terror of the evening, but I could see in my daughter's eyes that sleep wouldn't come easily for her. Tell me everything, I said, pouring 2 cups of coffee with hands that still trembled slightly from anger. And don't you dare lie to me again. Thalia wrapped her hands around the mug like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to reality. For a long moment she just stared into the dark liquid, tears sliding down her cheeks. Dad, I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to drag you and Emma into this mess. But you did drag us into it, so start talking. She took a shaky breath. Marcus, he's not the man I married. Or maybe he is, and I was just too blind to see it. About 2 years ago, he started coming home with more money than his construction job could possibly pay. When I asked about it, he said he'd gotten a promotion, a raise. But that wasn't true. No, her voice was barely a whisper. He was running drugs for someone called Vincent Kozlov. Small stuff at first, or so he claimed. Just making deliveries, picking up packages, but it escalated. The name Kozlov sent a chill down my spine. Even I, a retired insurance adjuster from suburban Atlanta, had heard whispers about Vincent Kozlov. He was the kind of man who appeared in newspaper headlines when rival gang members turned up dead in the Chattahoochee River. How did you find out? I saw him counting money one night. Stacks of it, Dad. More money than we'd ever had. When I confronted him, he hit me for the first time. She touched her cheek unconsciously. He said I was asking too many questions, that it was better if I didn't know details, but I couldn't stop wondering where it was all coming from. I reached across the table and took her hand. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you come home then? Because I was scared, and because I thought I could fix it. I thought if I could just convince him to stop, to find legitimate work, everything would go back to normal. She laughed bitterly. I was so naive. What changed? 3 months ago, Marcus came home in a panic. He'd been caught skimming money from one of his deliveries. Not much, maybe $3,000. But to Kozlov, it didn't matter. Marcus owed him $30,000 as punishment plus interest that made it grow to $50,000. So Kozlov is the one threatening you. Yes, but it's worse than that, Dad. Marcus told Kozlov about our house, about my jewelry, about Emma's college fund that my mother left her. He basically offered up everything we owned as collateral. My blood ran cold. Emma's college fund? $25,000. It's in a trust, but Marcus forged documents to access it. He gambled it away trying to win enough money to pay Kozlov back. Her voice broke completely. Dad, he stole Emma's future to cover his own debts. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful, normal. Nothing like the nightmare that had invaded my home. There's more, Thalia continued. When Marcus couldn't pay, Kozlov gave him an ultimatum. Either come up with the $50,000 or what? Or they'd take Emma instead. The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to stare at my daughter, hoping I'd misheard. They want to take my granddaughter as collateral. Kozlov has connections in human trafficking. He said a pretty little girl like Emma would be worth far more than $50,000 in the right markets. I had to grip the windowsill to keep from falling. The idea of anyone hurting Emma, of her disappearing into that darkness, made me physically ill. That's when I knew I had to run, Thalia continued. I packed what I could while Marcus was out, took Emma from school, and came here. I told everyone we were getting divorced because I thought maybe if I could hide here long enough, I could figure out a way to get the money. But Marcus found you. He's been watching the house for days. That's who I was meeting at night. Him, and sometimes one of Kozlov's other men. They've been giving me updates on how much time I have left, what Kozlov plans to do if I don't pay. I sank back into my chair, my mind reeling. The restraining order story. Complete fiction. I'm still married to him, Dad. Kozlov insisted on it. He said divorced women are harder to control, but wives have to obey their husbands. The medieval logic of it made me sick. And Emma knows? Some of it. She knows we're hiding from bad men. She knows Marcus isn't the daddy she used to know, but I've tried to shield her from the worst of it. That's why she was so frightened when I tried to hug her that first day. Marcus started hitting her too, near the end. Not badly, just slaps, when she asked too many questions or cried too much. But it was enough to terrify her. Rage burned in my chest, so hot I thought I might combust. That bastard hit my granddaughter? Dad, please. I know you're angry, but you have to understand, if we fight them directly, they'll kill us. All of us. Kozlov doesn't make idle threats. I was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd told me. Finally, I looked up at her. How much time do we have? 4 days. If I don't have the money by Friday night, they're taking Emma. And you don't have it. Marie, I have maybe $8,000 in my personal account. The house is underwater on the mortgage. My car is worth maybe $10,000 if I'm lucky. I'm nowhere close. I studied my daughter's face, seeing the desperation there, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been running on terror for months. There's something else, isn't there? She nodded reluctantly. Marcus isn't just collecting the debt. He's also making sure I don't go to the police. Kozlov has photos of me in the house where Marcus used to make his pickups. They say it proves I was part of the operation. Were you? No, I never knew what he was doing, but in the photos it looks like I'm there willingly. Kozlov says if I involve the police, he'll make sure I go to prison as an accomplice. And if I'm in prison, Emma would be defenseless. Exactly. I stood up again, this time with purpose. Where does Kozlov live? Dad, no. Whatever you're thinking, don't. These aren't people you can reason with or intimidate. They've killed people for less than what Marcus owes them. I'm not planning to reason with him. Thalia grabbed my arm. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Promise me you won't try to be a hero. Emma needs at least one of us alive. I looked down at my daughter, this woman who'd been carrying an impossible burden alone for months, and made a decision that would change everything. I need to make some phone calls. Dad, what are you planning? But I was already walking toward my study, my mind working through possibilities I hadn't considered in decades. Thalia didn't know everything about her old man. There were parts of my past I'd never shared with her, skills I'd hoped never to use again. 23 years ago, before I became an insurance adjuster, before I met her mother, I'd been someone else entirely, someone who knew how to handle men like Vincent Kozlov. It was time to remember how. As I reached for my phone, I heard Thalia call after me, Dad, please, don't make this worse. But it couldn't get worse. My granddaughter was in danger, my daughter was being terrorized, and animals like Marcus and Kozlov thought they could use my family as pawns in their sick games. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I spent the next morning making quiet phone calls from my study, while Thalia and Emma stayed in the living room, both of them jumping at every sound from the street. The conversations I had were with people I hadn't spoken to in over 2 decades, men who'd once been part of a world I'd deliberately left behind. The third call finally got me what I needed. Lance Morrison. Jesus, I thought you were dead, came the gravelly voice of Tommy Castellano, a man who'd once saved my life in a warehouse in Miami. Not dead, Tommy, just retired. 23 years of retirement. What's got you calling in old favors? I explained the situation in broad strokes, leaving out the details that didn't matter. Tommy listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Vincent Kozlov's a nasty piece of work, Lance. You sure you want to poke that bear? I don't have a choice, it's my family. Understood. Give me until tonight. I'll see what I can dig up. I hung up and walked back to the living room, where Emma was coloring at the coffee table, while Thalia watched the street through a crack in the curtains. Who were you calling? Thalia asked without looking away from the window. Old friends. Dad, I told you. The front door burst open. Marcus strode in like he owned the place, not bothering to knock or announce himself. Behind him came another man I didn't recognize, shorter, stockier, with the kind of scars on his face that told stories I didn't want to hear. Emma dropped her crayon and scrambled behind the couch. Thalia stood frozen by the window. Well, well, Marcus said, looking around my living room with obvious disdain. Nice little setup you've got here, Lance. Very suburban. Get out of my house. Marcus laughed and settled into my favorite armchair without invitation. Oh, I don't think so. See, we need to have a family meeting. He gestured to his companion. Lance, meet Tony. Tony, this is the father-in-law I was telling you about. Tony nodded but didn't speak. He positioned himself near the front door, blocking our exit. What do you want, Marcus? Straight to business, I like that. Marcus leaned back in my chair, completely at ease. Here's the thing, Lance. I've been doing some research on you. Very interesting background you've got. My blood chilled, but I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Lance Morrison, formerly Lance Moretti, age 62, spent 15 years working for the Torino family in Miami before you disappeared and reinvented yourself as a boring insurance man in Georgia. Thalia's gasp was audible from across the room. I felt Emma's small hands grip my leg from behind the couch. That's ancient history. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've got some pretty valuable skills. Skills that could be very useful to the right people. Marcus stood up and walked over to where Thalia stood by the window. She tried to back away, but he grabbed her arm, the same one he'd bruised the night before. See, here's what's going to happen. You're going to help me solve my little problem with Kozlov. And in exchange, I won't tell him about your very interesting past. Let go of my daughter. Or what? You'll call the cops? Marcus's grip tightened on Thalia's arm, making her wince. I wonder what they'd think if they knew that the respectable Lance Morrison used to wash money for the biggest crime family in Florida. Wonder if there are any outstanding warrants with your real name on them. The room was spinning. How had he found out? I'd buried that life so deep I'd almost convinced myself it had never happened. You're fishing. Am I? Let me refresh your memory. 1998 to 2003. You ran a legitimate insurance business that happened to process a lot of very convenient claims for the Torino organization. Expensive cars that got stolen right after the policies were updated, houses that burned down just when the owners needed cash, boats that sank in perfectly calm weather. Tony spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. Boss knows all about you, old man. Your real name's on a list of people he's been looking for. My hands clenched into fists. Vincent Kozlov knew the Torinos. Kozlov's been expanding his territory, Marcus said, absorbing smaller operations, collecting old debts. Turns out Antonio Torino had some very detailed records before he died in federal prison. Records that mentioned a certain accountant who disappeared with knowledge of some very sensitive financial arrangements. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. If Kozlov knew about my past, if he had Antonio's old files, what does he want? Marcus smiled, still holding on to Thalia. Same thing he's always wanted. Money. But not just the $50,000 I owe him. He wants the $2 million in Torino money that went missing when you disappeared. I don't have $2 million. Maybe not liquid. But you've got this house, your retirement accounts, your life insurance policies, plus whatever you stashed away during your years of creative accounting. I looked at Emma, still hiding behind the couch, her face pale with terror, then at Thalia, tears streaming down her cheeks as Marcus's grip left new bruises on her arm. Even if I had that kind of money, what guarantee do I have that he'd leave my family alone? You don't, Marcus said simply. But here's what you do have. A choice. Work with us, help us recover what Kozlov thinks you owe him, and maybe he lets you all live quietly somewhere far away from here. And if I refuse, Tony stepped forward from his position by the door. Then we take the kid now, and you get to spend whatever time you have left, knowing it's your fault. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Emma whimpered from behind the couch, and something inside me snapped. Don't you ever, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, threaten my granddaughter again? Marcus laughed, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Maybe he was finally seeing the man I used to be, instead of the suburban retiree he thought he was dealing with. Tough talk from a guy whose house is surrounded. Surrounded? Tony gestured toward the window. Take a look. I moved to the curtain and peered out. 3 cars were parked strategically around my house, one across the street, one at each end of the block. Men sat in each car, watching. In case you were thinking of running, Marcus explained, or calling those old friends of yours for help. My phone rang. Marcus nodded to Tony, who moved quickly to snatch it from my hand before I could answer. He looked at the caller ID and smiled. Tommy Castellano. Now that's a name from the old days. Tony showed the phone to Marcus. Boss is going to be very interested to know you're reaching out to old contacts. They knew about Tommy, which meant they'd been watching me longer than I'd realized, listening to my calls, tracking my movements. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, releasing Thalia. and walking over to where Emma was hiding. My granddaughter pressed herself further behind the couch as he approached. "You've got until midnight tonight to decide. Either you help us get Kozlov his money, or Emma takes a little trip with some of Tony's friends. Don't touch her." "I'm not touching her, Lance. I'm just explaining the situation." Marcus crouched down so he was at Emma's eye level. "You understand, don't you, sweetheart? Grandpa needs to make a grown-up decision." Emma looked at me with those big brown eyes, and I saw in them the same look I'd seen in my own mirror 30 years ago. The look of someone who knows they're completely at the mercy of dangerous people. "Get away from her." Marcus stood up slowly. "Midnight, Lance. We'll be in touch about the details." He headed toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and don't even think about running. We'll know if you try to leave. And if you do." He looked back at Emma one more time. "Well, let's just say it won't end well for anyone." After they left, I double-locked the door and checked every window in the house. Thalia and Emma huddled together on the couch, both of them crying now. "Dad," Thalia whispered, "is it true? What Marcus said about your past?" I sat down heavily in the chair Marcus had occupied, feeling every one of my 62 years. "Yes, it's true. But why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at my daughter, at my granddaughter, at the life I'd built from the ashes of my old one, because I thought I'd left that world behind forever. I thought I could protect you from it. What are we going to do now? I was quiet for a long moment, weighing my options. They were all bad, but some were worse than others. "I'm going to make sure Emma is safe," I said finally, "whatever it takes." But even as I said the words, I knew that the peaceful life I'd built was over. The past I'd spent 23 years running from had finally caught up with me, and this time there was nowhere left to run. The hours until midnight crawled by like years. I spent most of the afternoon sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a legal pad where I'd been trying to figure out how to get my hands on $2 million in less than 8 hours. The math was impossible. Even if I liquidated everything I owned, the house, my retirement accounts, my life insurance policy, I might scrape together $400,000, and that would take weeks, not hours. Emma had finally fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from fear. Thalia sat across from me at the table, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee she hadn't touched in an hour. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "I'm working on it." But I wasn't, really. I was thinking about Tommy's call, the one Tony had intercepted. Tommy would be expecting me to answer when he called back with information about Kozlov. When I didn't, he'd know something was wrong. The question was whether he'd care enough to do anything about it after 23 years. "Dad, I need to tell you something." I looked up from my useless calculations. Thalia's face was pale, but there was something different in her expression. Determination, maybe. "What is it?" "I haven't been completely honest with you about everything." My stomach dropped. "What haven't you told me?" She glanced toward the living room where Emma was sleeping, then back at me. "I have evidence. Against Marcus and Kozlov." "What kind of evidence?" "Photos, documents, recordings." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been collecting it for months." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You've been spying on them?" "Not spying exactly. But when Marcus started coming home with all that money when I suspected something was wrong, I started paying attention. I took pictures of the cash when he thought I wasn't looking. I recorded some of his phone conversations with an app on my phone. I even followed him a few times." "Thalia, that was incredibly dangerous." "I know, but I thought if I could prove what he was doing, I could use it to protect Emma and myself. Maybe make a deal with the police or the FBI." "Why didn't you use it?" "Because Marcus found out." She touched her cheek where the faded bruise was barely visible now. "That's when he started hitting me. He said if I ever tried to use any of it, Kozlov would kill all of us. But Dad, what I have, it's enough to put both of them away for decades." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. "Where is it?" "Safety deposit box at First National Bank. I've got photos of Marcus with known drug dealers, recordings of him talking about specific shipments, even some financial records that show money laundering through his construction company." "And you never told anyone?" "I was going to. That's why I really came here, not just to hide. I thought maybe if I could get far enough away, I could turn everything over to the authorities and disappear into witness protection or something." "But But then Marcus found us, and now they're watching the house, probably tapping our phones. If I try to go to the police now, they'll take Emma before you can get protection." She nodded, tears starting to fall again. "I'm trapped, Dad. We're all trapped." I stood up and walked to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. The cars were still there, men sitting patiently in each one, waiting. "This evidence," I said slowly. "How damaging is it?" "Enough to destroy them both. There's one recording in particular. Marcus was drunk, bragging to someone on the phone about a shipment they intercepted from a rival dealer. 3 people died in that robbery, Dad. I have him confessing to murder." A plan began to form in my mind, dangerous and desperate, but maybe our only chance. "What time does the bank close?" 5 o'clock. "Why?" I checked my watch. 3:30. We had 90 minutes. "Because we're going to get that evidence." "Dad, no, they're watching us. The moment we leave this house." "I know. That's why we're not all leaving." I walked back to the table and sat down, lowering my voice even further. "Here's what we're going to do. At 4:15, you're going to start a fight with me, a loud one. Make sure they can hear it through the windows." "What?" "Scream at me about how I'm not helping, how I'm a coward, how you're tired of hiding. Then storm out of the house and drive away. They'll follow me." "Exactly. While they're following you, I'll take Emma and slip out the back. There's a drainage culvert that runs behind the Hendersons' yard. It connects to the storm system that comes out near the shopping center." Thalia stared at me. "You want to crawl through sewers with a 9-year-old? It's better than letting them take her. While you're leading them on a chase, Emma and I will get to the bank, get the evidence, and figure out how to use it." "And then what?" "Then we end this." It was quiet for a long moment, thinking it through. "What if they don't all follow me? What if they leave someone to watch the house?" "Then we improvise." "Dad, this is insane. Do you have a better idea?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. At exactly 4:15, Thalia began her performance. She started by raising her voice just enough to be heard through the windows. "I can't do this anymore, Dad. Sitting here waiting for them to come. Take Emma." I played my part, though every word felt like glass in my throat. "Keep your voice down. We have to think this through." "Think? We've been thinking for days. While you're thinking, my daughter is in danger." She was good at this, I realized. The desperation in her voice was completely convincing because it was real. "Thalia, please. Let's just... no." She threw something, a magazine, I think, and it hit the wall with a loud smack. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. If you won't protect us, I'll find someone who will." I heard a car door slam outside. Good. They were paying attention. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking just fine. I'm going to the police and I'm going to tell them everything." Another car door. They were getting ready to move. "Thalia, don't do this." "Watch me." She grabbed her purse and her car keys, making sure to jangle them loudly. Then she stomped toward the front door. "If you leave this house, don't bother coming back," I shouted after her. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. I waited 30 seconds, then crept to the window and peered out. Thalia was backing out of the driveway aggressively, tires squealing slightly. 2 of the 3 surveillance cars immediately started their engines. The third hesitated for a moment, then followed. Perfect. I woke Emma gently, putting my finger to my lips before she could speak. "We're going on an adventure, sweetheart, but we have to be very, very quiet." She nodded, still groggy, but alert enough to understand the seriousness in my voice. I led her through the house to the back door, moving carefully to avoid the creaky floorboard near the kitchen sink. Outside, the late afternoon sun was bright, which would make us more visible, but also make it harder for anyone watching to see clearly into shadows. The drainage culvert was exactly where I remembered it, hidden behind an overgrown hedge that separated my property from the Hendersons. It was smaller than I'd hoped, but big enough for us to crawl through if we stayed low. "Grandpa, it's scary," Emma whispered as we approached the dark opening. "I know, sweetheart. But remember how brave you were last night when you woke me up? I need you to be that brave again." She took my hand and squeezed it. "Okay." The crawl through the culvert was every bit as unpleasant as I'd expected. The concrete was damp and smelled like stagnant water and decades of debris. Emma whimpered once when something scurried past us in the darkness, but she didn't panic. 20 minutes later, we emerged behind a dumpster in the shopping center parking lot, dirty and exhausted, but undetected. First National Bank was only 2 blocks away. Mr. Morrison, the bank manager, a woman named Patricia, whom I'd known for 15 years, looked surprised to see me covered in grime and accompanied by an equally dirty child. "Is everything all right?" "Family emergency," I said, hoping she wouldn't ask questions. "I need to access my daughter's safety deposit box." She gave me her key and permission. It was a lie, but a small one. Thalia had given me her spare key years ago when she first rented the box, just in case something happened to her. Patricia frowned. "I'm not sure about the protocol for that. Usually the box holder needs to be present." "Please, Patricia, it's urgent." Something in my voice must have convinced her because she nodded reluctantly. "Let me get the signature cards and we'll see what we can do." 15 minutes later, Emma and I were alone in the small viewing room with Thalia's safety deposit box. Inside was exactly what she'd promised: dozens of photographs, several USB drives, and a thick envelope of documents. I flipped through some of the photos and felt sick. Marcus with known criminals, stacks of cash being counted, weapons being exchanged. But it was one of the USB drives that made my blood run cold. I plugged it into the laptop Patricia had provided and found dozens of audio files. I clicked on one at random and immediately heard Marcus's voice, drunk and boastful, describing in detail how he and 2 other men had ambushed a rival dealer's car, killed the driver and 2 passengers, and taken their shipment. This wasn't just evidence. This was a death warrant for anyone who possessed it. "Grandpa, someone's coming," Emma whispered. I looked up to see shadows moving past the frosted glass door to the viewing room. Too many shadows, too purposeful. They'd found us. I quickly shoved everything back into the box, but kept one USB drive in my pocket. If we didn't make it out of here, at least the evidence might survive. The door opened, and Tony stepped inside, followed by 2 men I didn't recognize. "Hello, Lance. Fancy meeting you here." "Easy, Tony," I said, instinctively moving to shield Emma behind me. "No need for dramatics. We're just conducting some family business." Tony smiled, but it was the kind of smile a shark gives right before it attacks. Family business involving safety deposit boxes? How interesting. He gestured to his companions. "Boys, why don't you help Mr. Morrison and his granddaughter gather up whatever they came here for?" "That won't be necessary." The voice came from behind Tony, and I felt a surge of relief so strong it nearly knocked me down. Tommy Castellano stepped into the viewing room, his own 2 men flanking him. "Well, well," Tommy said, his eyes never leaving Tony's face. "Look what we have here, Vincent Kozlov's little errand boys, threatening an old friend of mine." Tony's confidence faltered slightly. "This doesn't concern you, Castellano." "Oh, but it does. You see, Lance here called in a very old favor, and I always pay my debts." The tension in the small room was suffocating. 5 dangerous men facing off, while Emma pressed against my back, probably wondering if this was how her short life would end. "Grandpa," she whispered, "are these the good guys or the bad guys?" It was a fair question. In my old world, the line between good and bad guys was often just a matter of perspective. "They're my guys, sweetheart," I whispered back. Tommy heard me and chuckled. "That's right, little one. Your grandpa and I go way back." He looked at Tony again. "Now I suggest you and your friends find somewhere else to be. This is a private family matter. Kozlov's not going to like this." Then maybe Kozlov shouldn't have threatened my friend's family. Tony looked like he wanted to argue, but he wasn't stupid. Tommy Castellano commanded respect in circles where respect was earned through fear. After a tense moment, Tony nodded to his men, and they backed toward the door. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah, it is," Tommy replied. "Tell your boss that Lance Morrison is under my protection now, all of his family. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." After they left, Tommy turned to me with a grin. "You always did know how to pick your enemies, Lance. How did you know where to find me?" "I've been watching Kozlov's people since you called. When I saw them mobilize, I followed. Good thing, too." He looked at the safety deposit box, its contents still scattered on the table. "What have you got there?" I quickly explained about the evidence Thalia had collected, showing him some of the photographs and playing a snippet of one of the recordings. Tommy's expression grew darker with each revelation. "Jesus, Lance, your daughter's been sitting on evidence that could bring down Kozlov's entire operation." She was afraid to use it. They threatened Emma. Tommy nodded grimly. Smart girl to be afraid, but stupid girl to think she could handle this alone. He picked up one of the photos showing Marcus with a known killer named Danny Rourke. This changes everything. How? Because Vincent Kozlov has been very careful to keep his hands clean. He's never been directly connected to any of the violence his organization commits. But this, he held up the photo. This proves your son-in-law is working directly for him. And these recordings of murders, that's the kind of evidence the FBI dreams about. I felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. So we can use it? We can do better than that. We can end this whole thing tonight. An hour later, I was sitting in the back of Tommy's car with Emma, heading back toward my house. Tommy had made several phone calls, speaking in the kind of code I remembered from the old days. By the time we arrived, there were federal agents positioned throughout my neighborhood, invisible but present. Thalia was already home looking frantic until she saw us climb out of Tommy's car. "Dad! Emma! Thank God you're okay." She ran to us, pulling Emma into a fierce hug. They followed me for an hour before I lost them in downtown traffic. I was terrified something had happened to you. "We're fine, sweetheart. Better than fine, actually." I introduced her to Tommy, explaining quickly how he'd helped us at the bank. Then I told her about the plan. "The FBI?" Thalia looked skeptical. "Dad, these people have connections everywhere. What if nothing?" Tommy interrupted. "I've been dealing with Vincent Kozlov for 15 years. The man's got one weakness. He's greedy, and greedy people make mistakes." As if on cue, my phone rang. "Marcus." Tommy nodded for me to answer, then activated a recording device he'd produced from his jacket. "You've got some nerve, old man." Marcus's voice was tight, with barely controlled rage. "Calling in outside help wasn't part of the deal." "The deal's changed, Marcus." "Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've just made things a whole lot worse for everyone. Kozlov's not happy about your friend's interference." "Then maybe Kozlov should have thought of that before he threatened my family." There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice came back colder than before. "You've got 1 hour to deliver what we agreed on, the $2 million plus interest for the inconvenience. $3 million total. And if I don't, then we take Emma tonight. And your friend Castellano? He won't be able to protect her where she's going." The line went dead. Tommy looked at the recording device with satisfaction. "Perfect. He just admitted to kidnapping conspiracy on a federal wiretap. Now what? Now we wait for them to come to us." The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. Emma dozed fitfully on the couch while Thalia and I sat at the kitchen table, watching Tommy coordinate with the federal agents through a series of cryptic text messages. At 11:30, the surveillance cars returned. This time there were 5 of them, and men were getting out of each one. "Showtime," Tommy muttered. Marcus kicked in my front door at exactly midnight, just like he'd promised. He stormed in with 6 men, including Tony and 2 others I recognized from Thalia's photographs. "Time's up, Lance," Marcus shouted. "Where's my money?" I stood up slowly from my chair, making sure Emma stayed hidden behind the couch. "I don't have your money, Marcus." "Then I guess we're taking the girl." "No," said a voice from the hallway. "You're not." Marcus spun around as federal agents poured through every entrance to my house. The front door, the back door, even through windows. In seconds, the room was full of men and women in FBI windbreakers, all with their weapons drawn. "Marcus Holloway, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, money laundering, and accessory to murder," announced a woman who appeared to be in charge. "You have the right to remain silent." But Marcus wasn't listening to his rights. He was staring at me with pure hatred. "You think this ends it?" he snarled as the agents cuffed him. "Kozlov will never stop coming for you, never." "Actually, he will," Tommy said, stepping out from behind one of the agents. "See, while you were busy threatening families, Vincent's been having his own problems. Seems someone tipped off the feds about a major shipment coming in tonight. 30 kilos of pure heroin, street value about $2 million. Marcus's face went white. "You didn't." "Oh, we did. Right about now, your boss is getting acquainted with a SWAT team at the port of Savannah, along with about 20 of his closest associates." As the agents led Marcus and his men away, the woman in charge approached me. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Agent Sarah Chen. I understand we have you and your family to thank for breaking open a case we've been working on for 3 years. My daughter deserves the credit. She's the one who collected the evidence." Agent Chen looked at Thalia with respect. "Mrs. Holloway, What you did was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous. The evidence you gathered is going to put a lot of very bad people away for a very long time. What happens now? Thalia asked. Now you go back to your normal lives. Kozlov's organization is finished. Marcus will spend the rest of his life in federal prison, and you're all under witness protection protocols until we're certain there are no loose ends. After the agents left, taking boxes of evidence and leaving my house feeling strangely empty, Tommy lingered for a few minutes. "You did good tonight, Lance," he said. "Margaret would have been proud." "Thanks for coming when I called, Tommy. I owe you." "No, you don't. We're even now. But Lance?" He gripped my shoulder. "Stay retired this time. The world's changed since our day. It's a lot uglier now." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. 6 months later, Emma was back in school, Thalia had found a job at a local nonprofit, and I was teaching my granddaughter how to tend a garden in our backyard. The nightmares had mostly stopped, though Emma still slept with her door open and a nightlight on. Marcus was serving life without parole in a federal supermax prison. Vincent Kozlov had died in a shootout with federal agents rather than surrender. Most of his organization had been dismantled. One evening, as I was tucking Emma into bed, she looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. "Grandpa, were you really one of the bad guys a long time ago?" I considered how to answer that. "I made some mistakes when I was younger, sweetheart, but I learned from them." "And now you're one of the good guys?" "Now I'm just your grandfather who loves you very much." She smiled and snuggled deeper into her blankets. "I love you too, Grandpa. Thank you for keeping us safe." As I turned off her light and walked back to the living room where Thalia was reading, I realized something profound had changed in our family. We'd been through fire together, and we'd survived. The secrets were gone, the lies were over, and for the first time in years, we were truly free. The past I'd spent decades running from had finally caught up with me, but instead of destroying my family, it had saved us. Sometimes the very things we're most ashamed of become the tools we need to protect what matters most. And what mattered most was sitting in my living room, safe and sound, finally able to sleep without fear. We were home.